Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special summer edition of GameDay One, the show. I'm Kevin Devini Jr., brought to you by Veolia. I want to thank our sponsors for being here as we launch GameDay One. It was a great spring season, and I moved to the summer months. We're going to try and do this throughout the summer, do a little bit of a podcast type show, starting with this one, which is a very exciting one because for the first time, maybe ever, we have a legitimate movie that was created about a local sports team. That team being the Rye Football team from 2023, which, as you know, won the state championship. The ride they took to get there was pretty incredible, and it was all documented by our friend Ian Colalucci, who produced the movie Garnet Pride, which will be available on YouTube on July 1. Here's the trailer.
Let's go! All 1, 2, 3! All right!
What makes Rye Football so special is the community.
We have a really good group. We've been together for a long time. It's now all about making it happen on game day.
We'll play hard. It's what we have to do.
Here, the amount of love we have for each other, it's special.
The atmosphere is just crazy because the whole community is behind us.
We want to be compelled to get the best out of each other.
We have a great field position, and it goes break down.
It's kind of become synonymous, the football culture here.
It's just basically a group of 50 best friends, in my opinion.
Are you hanging out with your girls this weekend?
No matter who you are, where you are in the world 20 years later, you're always going to be a Garnet. You always have that pride.
We'd imagine ourselves playing there one day, held to the highest standards possible.
Winning a state championship out of Section 1 is extremely difficult because you have to survive Section 1 first.
Ball to his right, throws across the middle, touchdown, Rye!
I don't give a f*** you were down, people. I need everyone to step up and want to kill somebody next.
Even though I wasn't a captain, I felt like I was a leader.
I love you boys so much. There's no other fucking guys I'd rather do it. No one.
Across all sports, but this team, this 2023 football team is really special.
And now I bring in the director, really not the director, he's the director, editor, sound engineer, he was the videographer, he was everything on this project. And I bring in my good friend, Ian Colalucci, who joins me now. And Ian, I don't know where we even begin. I mean, the trailer, it brings you in. It does exactly what a trailer is supposed to do. It gets you excited about the film. Tell me about, the process. Let's go back to day one. When did you decide you were going to start following Rye Football?
Well, it's funny, Kevin, because at the beginning of the season, I just thought I was going to be doing my usual hype videos and sort of promotions surrounding the Rye Football Club. But a couple of weeks before the season started, a couple of players and parents approached me with this idea of doing a documentary, a real full-scale inside look at the Rye Football team. And as I thought about it, I thought there really hasn't been this kind of exposure for a team in the tri-state area where you really get a chance to look inside and see what's really going on in terms of the coaches, the players, what they're thinking about, what they're talking about. And that's something I knew that I wanted to take a chance on and wanted to be a part of. So from day one, it was just, I wanted to be a part of this, and we got going with it.
So day one was August. You start following through preseason practice to build up to the Harrison game. And then they lose the first game. Any part of you think, well, we might have just been wasting our time here a little bit?
Well, it's funny because when you lose the first game, obviously, it sets a tone. It sets a tone for the season like, well, maybe we're giving up. Maybe this season is too far gone if they're losing the first game. But this team was always about resiliency. And I think that message would stand no matter what happened throughout the season. And after that first loss, it was gut-wrenching. It was certainly, a rough way to start the season. But as things picked up, I started to see that there was a real true story to tell here, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely was. And the story unfolds. I mean, anyone who followed the season knows how the story ends. But the way the story unfolded week after week was pretty impressive. Let's go back to start. Dino Gar, obviously, the head coach of Rye, is a prominent figure in the movie.
Sure.
Was it hard to get him to sort of go with this whole concept? I mean, he's not really, he's more of a media guy now than he was when I first started. He was not a media guy then. But was it hard to get him to kind of open up, even in tough moments, halftime, losses, things like that?
I will give Dino Gar so much credit for his willingness to be involved with this because coaching a football team, especially in Section 1, is a difficult challenge. I mean, you have week after week, opponent after opponent is always a difficult challenge, and you have to be prepared in the way that you create your game plan, prepare your players, prepare your coaches, everything with that. And Dino did not even lift a blink or any, he really didn't have any resentment or anything towards it. He was open to this idea, and I was just so happy to be involved that he was, open and willing to do interviews and candid conversations. And even throughout the season, after games where he won, he was willing to talk all the time. He provided a great look and a great feel for how this program really, resonates with the community. He did such a great job with it, and sometimes, he would be, as Dino Gar is, he can be, a bit, rough around the edges sometimes, but Dino was always willing to step forward and talk and say great things about the program and really give us an inside look. So I couldn't have been happier with how much he was involved.
He was terrific, and obviously player involvement. They seem very willing to want to be part of this. Any players that were not as a little shyer or anybody stand out? I mean, I think we noticed AJ Miller. He liked this. He really enjoyed this from day one. Any players on the other side?
I feel like no matter who I interviewed, they always were willing to provide their own perspective on how they felt the season was going. And when you look at someone like AJ, who obviously, he's the quarterback, he's very vocal captain, he provides a good perspective on how the season is going. But I think what was fascinating was to look at some of the other players and sort of see, their view on the Rye program as a whole, their view on the culture, the community. I look at guys like Sean Dratty and Ronan O'Byrne. No, they were not captains, but they have such a unique perspective on it because not only were they key members of the team and the, player community as a whole, they were vocal. They really, showcased that even though, Ronan obviously played every game as an offensive lineman, Sean did not play as much, but both of them provided such unique perspectives on the season as a whole. They talked about, how this football program has been ingrained with them since they were 5-6 years old. They remembered coming down to the turf and, practicing and playing, when they were kids and looking up to the older players as I think AJ put it, as demigods. That was his wording. So I think the real pleasure and the unique perspective on it is seeing everyone and sort of how they view the Rye football program as a whole.
Absolutely. I think obviously a lot of them had, family members, fathers, older brothers who played, so they kind of appreciated the whole ride, obviously. So the ride goes, they lose the first game of the season, they bounce back a couple of wins, then they lose to Pleasantville. Was there any concern then that the movie wasn't going to have the ending that it ended up having?
Well, we were always going to do the movie, no matter what the result was. I mean, even if they had lost in the first round of the playoffs, they had lost in the section championship, state semis, whatever, this was still a story we wanted to tell because, at the end of the day, this was about showcasing the Rye football community as a whole. And we got to do that. No matter what the result was, that was going to happen. But when you talk about that week 4 ending, right? That to me, and when people get a chance to watch this, that's a real turning point in the season for them. You see sort of the emotions on their face when they're at this 2-2 point. They feel like they've let their families down. They feel like they've let the community down. And the way that I like how Shepard Griffith describes it when after the loss, he says there's blood and dirt on our faces and everybody just looked mentally destroyed. And I thought that was such a perfect way to encapsulate what it feels like when you're 2-2. And at that point, it was almost like the team needed something to galvanize around. They needed something to rally around. And there was such a critical point. We can dive into this a little more, but this was a critical point. It was a turning point and something I really wanted to highlight as we headed into the stretch run they went on. I
thought Shep stole the movie in some scenes. I mean, there was some parts of the movie where his emotion and just him sitting on the couch and talking to you, because obviously it's a documentary and, you have a lot of interviews in real time after games, before game stuff, but then you had the kids in, doing interviews reflecting on the entire season. I thought Shepard was terrific in a lot of those moments.
Absolutely.
Very real, very real. I mean, it was fantastic. The so the season turns, but let's just, before we move on to the Pleasantville game, I thought so you invited me to come and watch the film for the first time with players at Rye that day, last week. And the only time I really felt tension, and we all know, again, these players all know how it ends, was when you had me in the movie a lot, talking about Daniel Picard. And they seem to really, that sort of brought out a different level of energy. Could you feel that about him specifically and about Pleasantville, especially after that loss?
Absolutely. It is Everybody talks about Rye Harrison as this contentious rivalry, but Rye Pleasantville is evolving into that as we speak. I mean, when you have these two powerhouses in Class B, and I don't know how this is going to evolve, obviously, with Rye moving up to A next year, but when you have a prolific talent on one side of the ball, and you have, 11 defensive players who are going to do everything they possibly can to, tackle him, lay him out, destroy him, whatever you want to say, that is something that needs to be told when you're talking about the story of this game, Rye versus Pleasantville. You talk about, the Rye Garnet offense against, the Picard brothers or anyone on that very talented Pleasantville team. That's the story of this game. It's these two powerhouse programs in Class B going up against each other. And yes, obviously, when you highlight a player on the opposing team, of course they're gonna, view it, he's their opposition, he's their rival. Of course you're gonna see that tension. But at the end of the day, that's the story that needs to be told when you're talking about that game. So that's what I wanted to do in that moment.
I don't think you held back in any way, but I thought to myself as watching that, if there was any parts that Ian had to cut out of what kids said and things, I felt like it probably had to be around that. What was there any parts of the movie that you said, I can't use this. This is tough. I don't want to create any bad blood or have anything negative. Was there any parts of the movie that you felt like I have to cut this out? I can't use it.
In all honesty, I didn't think there was anything too ridiculous or crazy to cut out. I mean, sometimes, when you're looking at, coaches and players, and maybe if they're, cursing or doing something like that, maybe, you bleep it out, something like that. But I didn't really think there was anything to cut because I wanted it to be raw. I wanted it to be, a real look at this football team. And, when you talk about Rye and the culture and the community, you can only really see it if you get that raw look because, sometimes when you look at, a team like Rye Football, obviously, if you look at, the way that other teams view them in the, Section 1 community or in New York State, as you said as well, I mean, they are a team that everybody wants to beat. And I think that when you get a raw look at the players and you look at the coaches and you see how they react, you kind of see that they're similar to any other team that wants to win the state championship. They really have the same goals in mind. And I think, when we talk about the themes of this movie, resilience is so huge. And, the challenges that they overcame, especially after week 4 and throughout the rest of that season, I mean, that was so critical for them into getting in the state championship. So there were a lot of obstacles to overcome. There were certainly, a lot of moments that I wanted to see, but I didn't really think there was anything to cut out. I wanted to see that ball moment.
You introduced a couple of great human elements, for the non-football person who's going to be intrigued by this. Obviously, the Fenton family with what they went through with Archer's younger brother, and then obviously the flooding situation that people forget about. I mean, this is how that kind of impacts the city of Rye. I thought that was great. You basically were just missing a love story, and then you really had a movie, but you can't create those things. Moving to the second half of the season, they go on that big run. They go to the section championship. They win the section. Did you feel then that, all right, we got a movie here. We got a movie, once they win the section?
Yeah, I think that was a real turning point for them. And I think, honestly, after week 4, when you hear the stories of, the Fenton family and, their house floods, and they have this horrific familial tragedy that they have to deal with. And then, the team rallies around this, Hamish strong mentality. That was an amazing story just to begin with. And then the fact that they would continue winning and then go on to the state championship. Even if they had lost that state championship, the resiliency that I saw from that team and their ability to bond together, that's the story of the movie. They could have won by 50, lost by 50 in the state championship game. The story we wanted to tell was this is a community that rallies around itself in its most difficult moments. And through the means of sport, they were able to, forge this community bond that everyone in Rye could appreciate, rally around, and overall just come together in this moment where, this team kept winning. They won 11 straight games, I believe, something around that mark. And they made it to the state championship game and found a way to do it as a community and as a team. And that was the story I wanted to tell.
And you did it brilliantly. They win the state championship. What was the, I don't know. Did you ride the bus home? Did you get in your car and drive home from Syracuse? What was the feeling getting there and saying like, all right, now I got to get to work?
So funny story about that, actually. So I drove up to Syracuse actually with one of the parents. And on the way back after they won, I was like, I got to get on the bus because I knew there was going to be footage there. I knew they were going to be celebrating. I knew that there was something I wanted to see there. So one of the parents, I'll shout out Scott Stevens, who's a parent of Charlie Stevens. He graciously offered to take my car home so I could get on the bus and, be with the team and see their reactions afterwards. And, when you see some of the bus footage in the documentary, that's where it came from because, I needed to showcase that, they were so happy after they won. And then for the work itself, when you talk about, after the season ended, originally we had planned, and I think this is important, we originally planned to do it in episode format where we do, you have a preseason episode, first part of the regular season playoff championship, you name it. But once they won the state title and we could kind of step back a little bit and see there was a real kind of story arc and a progression here. That's when I sort of realized this needs to be in documentary format where we need to take a real hard, hour and a half look at this team from start to finish, because I don't think we would have seen that story arc without doing a whole holistic documentary as opposed to episode format.
Absolutely. So it ended up being 99 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
How many hundreds of hours of filming did you have?
I will tell you, in the days leading up to the documentary, I barely slept. I mean, there was so much footage. I mean, we mic'd up players. We, went to team dinners. I mean, there were so many different things that we looked at because when you at the end of the day, when you're talking about whether it's Hard Knocks or any sports documentary like Welcome to Wrexham or Friday Night Lights, anything like that, you notice how what makes it good is that you see the player, the person behind the player. And that's what I wanted to showcase. When you see those candid interviews, you see their emotions and you see how they feel. When you see, Sean Dratty mic'd up on the field talking about, how his girlfriend left him. I mean, that's funny. People can resonate with that. And I love that. I love stuff like that.
That was great. I thought the part when Dino Gar told Coach Prudian to be quiet, that was funny. There was a lot of moments where I laughed, just because I felt like only I would see something like this because I'm the only person who gets to be that close consistently.
Right.
So I kind of appreciated the whole world's going to get to see the dynamics of the coaching staff and the players
right.
and just how real it is. So I went to the Pleasantville football golf outing last week.
Okay.
And I sort of, and obviously the coaching staff was there. A lot of the players who were on last year's team were there. A lot of returning players. And I sort of said, I wanted to know, hey, I'm in this movie about Rye Football because you had me in the movie a lot, way more than I ever imagined. And I sort of was kind of giving them a little bit of a pitch, and all the kids said the same thing. They said, "Yeah, I don't want to watch it, but I probably will. I probably will check it out." So, what is your kind of your pitch? If everyone in Rye watches it, I would not be surprised. How do you get people outside who may not be rooting for Rye if they live in Pleasantville or Harrison? How do you get them to kind of say, "I'm going to sit down, I'm going to check this out"?
There's two elements to it that I believe would get anyone to watch. And one being specific to this area where, if you look at all the football documentaries out there, the high school football documentaries that are talking about, top flight teams in Florida or Texas or California and whatever, that's not what this is. This is a story about a team in Westchester County, New York. You do not think about football when you think of Westchester County. You think about it as a suburb of New York City. That's pretty much it. And that's a unique perspective that we get to see here. We get to see Rye, New York, which is, obviously it's known for a lot of different things, not exactly high school football on a universal scale. Mm-hmm. Maybe in this area, sure, but not necessarily in the United States. So when you look at that from I get to see what Northeast high school football looks like. I think that that's kind of unique, especially for that football fan who wants to see a different element of, they're not all these players are going to Alabama or Texas or Florida. Some of them might be going to play. I know AJ's playing at Syracuse. You've got Amir White playing at Colby. I mean, these are schools that are Northeast schools. Colby isn't really known outside of this, Northeast area. So that's number one, I would say. And then number two, this is a universal story. If you notice, as you saw, it's not all about football. It's about resiliency and camaraderie and community. Those are three messages that anyone who loves sports or film or any great story, that's what you get to see here. And that's what I wanted to highlight with that. I mentioned, I talk about, Wrexham and Friday Night Lights. These were inspirations for me because when I watch those and I see, whether it's a storyline from one of their players, I wanted to emulate that when I talk about Rye football. I want to tell the story of Archer's brother and his house flooding. I want to tell the story of the captains getting together after week 4 because they were all so frustrated that they were letting down their community. That's a story that needed to be told. And anyone who wants to watch this, or anyone who's a sports fan, anyone who's just a fan of a good story, can really enjoy the topics that we cover in this 99-minute special.
You did an amazing job of telling a story, telling multiple stories, which was great. Your background, give people some background. What do you do? I mean, where did you, people like, first thing someone said, they go, well, who is this guy? That's what somebody said. So who is this guy?
Well, if I had to describe, myself, I don't come actually from Rye. Both my parents actually worked in Rye. My dad owned the Rye Country Store down on Purchase Street in Rye, New York, and my mom currently works as a psychologist in one of the office buildings in Rye. But I grew up in Greenwich, went to Greenwich High School. I played baseball at Greenwich High School, but I kind of came into Rye football through, when I was working, to make extra money while I was in high school and in college. I worked in the Rye school system doing recess and filming basketball games. And that kind of was my initial exposure, just to make money, when I was 17, 18, 19 years old. And now I'm 22 and I have finished school. I just graduated from NYU. And this was sort of, an opportunity to get involved in the documentary film space, working in film, really doing something I'm passionate about. I work currently for ESPN in the research department, but, this is something that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about telling stories. I'm passionate about, inside looks at people and personalities. I love talking to people and learning about them. That's something I'm really passionate about. And I'm passionate about, filmmaking and all that stuff. So I want to work in sports media, and I'm currently working in sports media. And this was sort of, another opportunity to sort of tell the story of the people who got me involved in the film space as a whole.
That's amazing. And so was this part of something that was this wasn't like a school project with NYU. This is just something you decided to do on your own. This was
not a school project. This was a real, wholehearted effort into making something truly original. I am interested in that production space. And, as I develop in my career, I feel like having a versatile skill set, especially in film, when you're working in sports media, when you're able to tell stories and have the analytical and financial skills that you need to be successful in that industry, that really can help you sort of move up in that space. And that's something I knew I wanted to keep going in terms of my professional development and, of course, tell the story of the Rye Garnet football team.
That's my next question. So how do you get the whole world to see this? Like, I walked out of that day saying, like, I need to help Ian. And again, not because I'm in it as much as I was, but just because I felt like it was such a good story. And the quality of the production and the editing, everything was so great. How do you, is it a film festival? Is it sending it to people, or is it just hoping that it just kind of goes viral on YouTube?
Well, I think the starting point when it comes out will be the Rye and Westchester communities as a whole, because as Rye tends to do, when there's a story about their own, when there's a story about their football team, you'll get a good base of support and viewership just from that alone. But the key, I think, going forward will be, how does the rest of the Westchester, New York football community react to this? Do they like this story? Do they think it's unique? Do they think it's interesting? Do they think it's important to tell this story? And then once you have the support and the viewership and the interest from that, then you can start to market this, whether it's to, my work at ESPN, potentially into that avenue, whether it's, just telling this story in local news outlets like with you right now, whether it's, submitting it to local sport film festivals. I know NYU, my alumni, actually does one. I'm planning to sort of potentially work with that as well. So I think once you get the support of the people that were involved and the people in the surrounding areas, that's when this thing can grow and become a true viral moment, a true story that needs to be shared.
And where can people see it? What's the date? July 1?
So July 1 is the planned release date, barring any horrible, tragic setbacks. I would imagine that will be the date when it comes out. And when people can see this will be on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and search Garnet Pride, it will come up immediately, I would hope. You'll have that, and then I will personally obviously highlight this. The Rye football program and the Rye community members will highlight this on their own pages as well. So anyone who follows Section 1 football will probably find it on Twitter or Instagram or any links to that, I would imagine. And then when you talk about further moments, as it's on YouTube, we're hoping that as build up increases, we're hoping as whether we can get local media exposure or anything like that, that's where really the wider audiences will come in and hopefully bring this thing up to another level.
And just to confirm, how many people worked on this movie with you?
So, so a couple. I will, in terms of anyone who's involved. I would say there's about 5 different people that I can count on. Big shout outs to Aaron Griffiths. He is one of the parents at Rye. He was sort of in this to begin with. He thought of that. He was one of the big proponents of this idea. And then we're working with a sound department as well, at Halo Music and Sound. They have been involved in sort of making sure that this thing sounds great when it comes out, because this is a football story, a documentary on the field. When you watch it in a screening room, there are things that we needed to look at, and when we have that adjustment, that will be hugely helpful. So we'll have him. We'll have our sound department. We have Aaron, who's been supporting me throughout the entire journey, and then of course all the editing and all the stuff that I've been doing so far. I mean, that's in terms of the film itself, and then I'm not even mentioning the countless players and coaches and parents who were supportive, who were interested in having this done, and I wholeheartedly want to credit the players who were willing to have me talk to them after they scored a touchdown, or after they caught an interception, or a fan who's excited about the game. They embraced it, and they did a great job doing that. And it's hard with distractions to be a good football team, but they were able to do that and did so with flying colors. And I couldn't be prouder of how they handled it.
That is awesome. And I tell you, I started doing game film and like trying to tell a story through,
of course,
full-length 7-8 minute film, games. And I think I did my first one like 6-7 years ago. And someone said, to me, these kids are going to watch this for the next 50 years. And I was like, I like that. And I think what you created here is some people are going to watch. These kids are going to be able to watch for the rest of their lives, which is show their grandkids, which is pretty special. So Ian, great job, man. I'm very excited to just even be a part of that, and to bring you on today and discuss the movie. So I'm anxious to watch it again. I'm going to show my kids when it comes out on July 1. So hopefully be some of your first viewers.
I can't thank you enough, Kevin. This is and just to sort of highlight and summarize, this is a story that is obviously unique in its own way when you talk about football and Rye and whatever it might be. But I hope that anyone who watches this can really, obviously get a sense of the culture and the community of Rye football, but they really just enjoy it. That's the whole thing. I mean, obviously it's a cool story and it's interesting, but if people can sit through all 99 minutes and they enjoy it, I've done my job. That's the most important thing.
It is so entertaining. It's just so fun to watch. I think the kids were great. Again, once you work on those little sound things, then we're all good. Because I saw your reaction the day we were watching it. There was some highs and lows and stuff, and that's really hard.
Oh my god!
It's so hard. Yeah,
I know. And then that was our first time viewing it. I mean, that was literally the first time I had put it out on a large screen and seen it. I'd seen clips, obviously, but when you put it out and you see it, and it's like, okay, great, let's fix these. And then once that's all done, I mean, we've got a real story when that's all set.
It was great. Ian, congratulations, man. Good luck. Enjoy July 1, man. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
No problem.